memo that has now been issued by the top brass in the finance ministry to its employees, stating that the strict discouragement of using AI or artificial intelligence tools on their official computers and other devices. Now, this memo comes with OpenAI CEO Sam Altman, who is currently in India to discuss India's vision for an artificial intelligence system that is cost effective. India now joins countries like Australia and Italy, who have similarly prohibited the use of AI tools when it comes to government devices. In this memo, the main issue cited by the finance department is that the use of AI tools could pose a significant threat. Let's in the meantime also talk about, when it comes to the details that are now coming, exactly what this memo is all about, and that has now been issued by the Ministry of Finance, which has gone on to say that has put an ban on AI tools such as ChatGPT and DeepSeek due to concerns over potential leakage of confidential documents and also of data. Now here it goes on to say, as far as this memo is concerned, that the use of these tools in office devices would be strictly avoided, and also saying that it could lead to possible leaks, and that is a threat that needs to be taken up, especially when it comes to just before the budget announcement that was made. Remains to be seen if that would be applicable even after that. Let's move on to other points as well, because these saying that of these tools, Hina is also joining us right now, would help us understand as far as what is the possible leaks that the government or this memo seems to be referring to, especially when it comes to all AI tools and applications.
Well, you know, the timing of this is very interesting, and let me just explain that for our viewers, Amita. Remember, OpenAI's ChatGPT was launched in November 2022. This order by the Ministry of Finance has come in January 2025. Just few weeks before, we had China entering into the AI space by launching DeepSeek. Now, in last 2.5 odd years, India has been using ChatGPT for work, and you know, this included work that happens in government departments as well, but there wasn't a lot of concern. Ever since we have a Chinese player entering into the AI market via DeepSeek, there are alarm bells that are ringing. That's what we can infer out of this order that has come out just weeks after China launched DeepSeek. That clearly shocked the entire world. Now, that's point number one. Second, what does this order really say? This order says that, you know, people who are working on official documents on their official computers in the Ministry of Finance should not use AI tools like ChatGPT as well as DeepSeek, because there are privacy issues. We have confidential information in the Ministry of Finance, and we do not know, you know, what kind of data, you know, these tools might pick up from official computers, and that's the reason why a clear direction has gone to the employees of Ministry of Finance. That's point number two. Now, point number three is that India is not the only country to issue a direction like this. Before India, after China launched DeepSeek, its AI tool, countries like Australia and Italy have already issued directions for the government departments to not use these AI tools like ChatGPT as well as DeepSeek for official purposes, because there are privacy concerns. We have confidential data, and we do not want to compromise that. Now, what is also important to note here, Amita, is that, you know, this memo is dated 29th of January, but you know, this news came out only when we had OpenAI CEO Sam Altman visiting India. Now, for OpenAI, India is the second, in fact, large market, and its user base of ChatGPT has also tripled in the last few years. So clearly, on one hand, while, you know, OpenAI is trying to expand its base for Indian users, on the other hand, this kind of a directive becomes important. And second important aspect on this is, will other ministries also follow suit? That remains to be seen. Back to you.
Hina, thank you very much for detailing out exactly what this memo is all about, because we have seen that especially coming just days ahead when it comes to the union budget announcement that was made. Let's go across to Sandeep Srinivasa, who is the CEO of WhatsApp, joining us here. Good afternoon to you, Sandeep. What do you have to say, especially when it comes to the Ministry of Finance that has banned the use of AI tools, especially when it concerns over potential leakage of confidential documents and data? And that also applies to all AI tools and other applications as well. Is the threat real, as there are pros and cons, that is? And of course, when it comes to government offices, should it also be applicable to other ministries?
Yeah, so thank you so much for asking that. So, what the Ministry of Finance has done is actually in line with a lot of regulations that India already has. If you probably recall, the RBI has regulations around data residency, and some of that were enforced against large international companies of friendly territories like MasterCard. MasterCard was banned in India for like 2 years, specifically because it did not comply with India data residency guidelines, right? So the ministry is like, well within its right to impose such constraints and for companies who actually don't follow the Indian regulations, right? Like, if you look at what all of these companies like Visa and MasterCard and even Amazon Web Services have now done, they have specific India compliances in place. Like AWS has a site called India Data Protection, right? I think like, in view of what they have, the memo, I think what we need to kind of understand is that they're not saying that like AI is bad. What they're saying is that like, this is basically a tool which is run from a foreign jurisdiction and does not follow Indian established regulations around data protection and around data residency. Potentially, if there were companies who were actually established servers in India and follow India data regulation and subject to Indian court laws, I don't see why the government would kind of like, block that. So I fully support the government in imposing this memo for, for tools held in a foreign jurisdiction.
But what happens when it comes to DeepSeek's recent surge, in popularity by announcing, India's plans to enter global AI race with its own foundational model as well? This is also coming in at a time when OpenAI CEO is here and he's expected as far as when it comes to these meetings that have also been taking place. But due to its sudden rise in popularity, do you believe that DeepSeek has also come under increasing scrutiny from regulators around the world?
Yeah, so absolutely, and it's not just a question of DeepSeek, but it is a question of, if there was an Indian company who would build a model but host it in the US, they would be subject to the same restrictions, right? And on the counter side, if there was like an American company who basically brought its models to India, brought it under Indian laws, Indian regulations, and hosted it in India, I see that being like, to some extent permissible for like, government usage and like, for regulated industry usage. So, and you're 100% right. Like, the emergence of DeepSeek and similar models, which are called the inference time reasoning models. For the very first time, they have opened up advanced usage, right? Like, and potentially like, people can use it to ask for it reasoned questions. And it's not just a question of data leakage, but it's also a question of bias. Like if you ask, is this policy in line with global policies? And if it's a biased model answering that question, they can potentially bias your understanding of what regulations are or what the right things are and everything. So it's not just a question of like, leakage, it's also a question of bias. And if you noticed, President Trump's recent orders around AI are specifically to limit bias in responses, according to American laws, right? Like, make no mistake. And so we like, until we have those regulations in place, that requirements that like you host those models in India and be subject to Indian
we've seen it before.
laws.
When it comes to even social media giants, they've had their run-ins with the government and also with the courts, citing jurisdiction and citing privacy of their customers. Now, India being a very attractive market, of course, this is something, that opportunity that they really want to delve in. But there is more a concern, which is, of course, the use of AI. Yes, it is being seen as a next generation tool, but rather when it comes to the concern on the misuse of AI, especially when it comes to the concern of DeepSeek. Why is that the alerts are only being sought after when it comes to DeepSeek on government devices due to data security risks? That is further intensifying concerns around mainly AI-driven tools.
Yes, so naturally, like, the single biggest concern around DeepSeek is that it is held in a jurisdiction that is basically subject to probably no international law, right? Like, you can even argue that OpenAI is subject to few international laws at least. DeepSeek doesn't like, encounter any of those international laws. DeepSeek doesn't even release, what is called safety reports, which like OpenAI, to their credit, does release, right? So there's definitely like a veil of like, like you don't know, what's happening behind the scenes and everything. DeepSeek is also very powerful. Like let's be very honest here. Like, it is capable of generating near human-like inferences and responses. So for the very first time, it is capable enough that, like, a government official or someone can, like, be tempted to go and, like, ask, like, complicated questions. So that answers why this kind of, like, moves were not taken for the last 2 years. Even on OpenAI side, the O1 class of models, which is equivalent to the DeepSeek like models, which are reason models, have come out very recently. They just, like, come out, like, 3 months back and everything. So all of this is basically a consequence of certain countries, like, where we have, certain, I would not say the most friendliest of relationships, combined with, like, the capability jumps that has happened in these models, which has not happened.
Threats and data manipulation seems to be the concern, and also saying that when it comes to data privacy issues surrounding DeepSeek could also be addressed mainly by hosting open source models on Indian servers as well. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Sandeep. Thank you very much for joining in, of course, with your insights. Thank you very much for taking out your time. Of course, this memo that has now been issued remains to be seen if it would be applicable to other Indian ministries as well. We head into a short break. You're watching Times Now.